Let's jump into today's discussion with Dr. Sam about his book, Dear Leader. Dr. Sam, thank you so much for joining us on the People and Projects podcast.
Thank you so much, Andy, for having me.
Hey, we'll talk about ideas in your book, but I'd like to start with you because I love to learn more about how someone's backstory, influences who they are today. So, can you think of any examples from your family culture growing up that shaped how you look at leadership and how you lead today?
Absolutely. Thank you, Andy. So, yes, my dad was a civil servant. He worked with the government. So it was a middle-class family, fairly comfortable. Um, I grew up in a loving family. So I guess that has helped quite a bit,
Hmm. Yeah,
and
yeah,
in laying the foundation for my values.
yeah.
I remember when I was really young, I loved to play soccer.
Mm.
And one day my dad just came home with a soccer ball. Oh my God, I was so excited. It was like, how did he know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it goes a long way to grow up in a loving family for sure. And I seem to recall, do I remember something about your grandfather? Was your grandfather a businessman or
Exactly.
construction, was it?
My grandfather was a builder.
Yeah.
My dad was also a building contractor,
Yeah.
and I studied civil engineering
Yeah.
because I wanted to continue in the family tradition,
Sure. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
um, Things did change a bit though. By the time I was out of school, my dad's business had gone down. There was this downturn in the economy in Nigeria then, and I had to then search for a job,
Mhm.
and that period when I was searching for a job was a dark period in my life because it took me almost 2 years to get a job.
Mhm.
I mean, you apply and apply and apply, and it's no, 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 all the way. And as a young person, you're just looking at the dreams you had while you were in school vaporized completely.
Yeah.
So I was disillusioned, everything seemed dark, but that turned out also to be a turning point in my life
Mhm.
because I began to ask myself, so is there a way? Are there any principles that can guarantee success?
Mm.
At least that can help one have a fairly predictable future. That was when I began to read books. I read Tough Times Never Last, but Tough People Do. I can't forget that.
Mhm.
And if I don't remember anything from the book, I remember this statement: attitudes are more important than facts. That almost twisted my brain. You said, what? Attitudes are intangible. You can't even see them. Facts are facts. They're real. And that was where I began to realize that we actually can't control most of the things that affect our lives, but we can affect the things that are inside us,
Mm.
our thoughts, our emotions, and that when we control those things that we can control, remarkably, life takes us to where we want to go. It's amazing, right?
Yeah. And
The
what a
way
gift to
you
have learned that earlier in your career then too, right?
Thank you. I think it's a big blessing
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
that's one major thing now that I speak on all over the world. That if you really want to change your life, you've got to change your thoughts,
Mhm.
right? So I'm grateful that everything turned out right because from that point onwards, the trajectory of my life has been up because then I know how to dream, how to set goals, and how to take action, work hard. I know the importance of skills, and I've acquired them quite a bit. Um, but then undergirding everything are the values, right?
Mhm.
My dad showed me mercy one day when I was playing the soccer ball and he warned me because I was hitting it against the wall near the neighbor's apartment. And he said, be careful. But then I trusted so much in my professional skills, right?
Right, right.
I continued until I just had the crack of the neighbor's window. And
Yes.
I thought I was going to get the beating of my life that day.
Yeah.
And then my dad just said, being a builder, he knew exactly where they sold those window panes. So he just
Mhm.
said, said I should take the money and go buy the window pane. I was afraid to even move close to him, right? Because I,
Mhm.
I thought it was a trick.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
eventually I got the money, I went and he fixed it. He
Yeah.
helped the neighbor to fix the window. And I thought, oh, I'm not going to get a whacking today.
But it did teach you that you can be honest and it turned out okay. I mean, you talk about principles and values for leaders a lot, right? Your book has a lot on that one. What have you found to be some of the most important principles for us as leaders, just you found personally, and maybe describe a couple of
Well, thank you, Andy. See, the thing about principles is that they don't change.
them?
So they make the outcome predictable. If I throw my phone up 10,000 times, it's coming down 10,000 times.
Yeah.
So principles, I say principles can be prophetic because
Mhm.
they actually give you an idea what the results will be ahead.
Mhm.
And there's power within principles. It's a force that is pulling that phone down. So leaders learn to leverage principles because principles give us leverage, right? They help us to achieve big results with small effort or average effort. So one major principle is love
Mm.
because leadership is about people.
Mhm.
And the highest relationship principle in the world is love. It simply means that you value the people you are leading, that, in fact, if I'm speaking in a faith scenario, let's say I'm speaking to a church or to church leaders, I tell them my understanding of the Bible is that every human being is an extension of God.
Mm.
There's a bit of God in everyone. And whatever it is you would not do to God, don't do it to another human being. Whichever way you would treat God, just treat somebody else. And I tell them that means you're going to treat people with excellence. One other principle is that of vision. You know, some people say vision is a mental picture of a preferable future. I define vision as the ability to see people, places, and things, not just the way they are, but the way they could be.
That's good.
Right. So leaders use the imagination. That's what makes us leaders. The fact that we tell people possibilities, things can change, things can improve. We can go from A to B. That's why people want to go with us. And the foundation for that vision is that love. The fact that I'm looking at someone, I'm appreciating the fact that the human being is the most powerful asset God put on our planet. And with that at the back of my mind, I see gaps in people's lives,
Mhm.
right? I say, this is where they should be, this is where they are. Then I want to bridge the gap, right?
Yeah.
And that then moves me to the essence of leadership, which is service,
Mhm.
right? The leadership is not about acquisition. The success of a leader is not measured by how much we acquire, it's actually measured by our contribution, how much we help to make other people's lives better.
I think sometimes in business people might think, I don't know this love talk. I don't know, but I mean, there's many different ways to say it also, and it's kind of the same idea. Like um, one guest said, you have to have high expectations, but high devotion, which means I don't just have high expectations. She could have said, I have high love. I'm devoted to you. I'm going to do everything I can to support you and motivate you and be available, accessible to you. Right? It's because
Exactly.
love is in English. It often doesn't have some of the subtleties that other languages have, but it's core for us as if we don't have that sort of, like you talk about empathy in the book, which maybe is a cousin. Actually, I think it's interesting. Authenticity is one of those things that you talk about as well. And
Absolutely.
sometimes people go, "Well, I'm just being authentic," and they're not willing to change. So by the way, when you talk about authenticity, how do you like to describe that?
Well, it's just being real,
Mm.
you know. It's And you know, that is one thing that the younger generation wants today, the millennials, the Gen Zs, they just want to see honesty, right?
Yeah.
I used to assume that people expected leaders to be perfect,
Mm.
but I learned over time because that made me to pretend a lot, right? That made me hypocritical because I thought they expected this standard of me, then I had to pretend to be like that.
Mm.
But then I found out people actually expect us to be perfectly honest,
Right. That's good.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I say that hypocrisy erodes the credibility of a leader
Mm.
because the leadership um, transaction actually rests on trust.
Yeah.
The authenticity enhances that trust. What you see is what you get.
Yeah. I've heard people say the three hardest words to say are "I love you," but I don't think that's it. Sometimes it's "I don't know," right? And sometimes being
Mm,
authentic could be like, "I don't know. Let's figure it out," right? Or what's your take? I mean, that's being authentically. I don't have to pretend that I'm perfect, right? I don't have to pretend I know it all, right?
exactly. Absolutely.
Mm,
So, who said that the leader has to be the one who knows everything? I
right.
think that a leader is just a broker, right? A
Ah,
broker of talents and
mm,
skills and abilities, right?
mm.
That's it.
That's a good picture for it. And, principles and values kind of go hand in hand. You talk about that a lot in your book and how they can help us as a leader. So, for example, in decision making, can you think of a way that values helped you make a decision?
Well, thank you. That's an interesting question. Yes. Example, I value family
Mhm.
and I made that clear. So in my list of priorities, I have God, I have family. So one of those days, um, our son had this parents teachers event in their school. Now, we were living in Nigeria. My son was schooling in the UK. And this meeting, which held only once in the year, fell on a Sunday.
Mm,
And I was supposed to be preaching as pastor of our church on that Sunday. Second day, it was my birthday. And I mean, I don't know how it is around the world, but in Nigeria, people honor their pastors and you tend to get a lot of gifts on your birthday.
mm,
So, but it wasn't difficult to make the decision at all. My
mm.
wife and I decided to go to our son's school
Yeah.
because I had told my associates, pastors, I will delegate everything that I can possibly delegate in my role here.
Yeah.
And if there ever comes a conflict between my role here in church and my role in my family, said my role in my family will come first.
Mm,
You guys know I can delegate for you to preach and teach. I can delegate for you to lead the meeting, but I cannot delegate for you to be husband to my wife or to
mm.
be father to my children.
It's
Okay.
good. Yeah.
So in that particular scenario, it was easy to make the decision. The family came first. So I think that's how values play up when we have to make the decisions. Sometimes it's a decision between good and bad,
Mm,
right? Between right and wrong. Those ones are sometimes pretty straightforward. But when it is between right and right,
mm.
sometimes that can be a bit tricky.
Got a friend who he's a, teacher within a major public school, and he thinks the best reason to be a teacher is you get summers off, but there's always this pressure to pull him back in during the summers. And he made
Mm.
a similar sort of value. He lives by a similar sort of value as you did, and he just said summers for my family, and it allowed him to say, I don't come in over the summer instead of, oh, I can't come in this week. They go, well, what about next week? So I
Exactly.
don't was based on a value. I can't
Mm.
almost implies, but if we keep asking, maybe we'll break them
Mm.
down, right? But we can
Mm.
stand firm on a value. Yeah.
Fantastic. I like that.
Yeah. I think
I
that
don't.
they're right. I
Make the
don't.
message
Right.
clearer
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
than
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. It kind of goes back to, I know a topic that you hit a lot is identity, because you say in the book that we cannot perform in a manner that's inconsistent with how we see ourselves. So, for example, if you are if you say to yourself, I am all about family, but you see yourself not acting that way, there's going to be that dissonance. So I'd love for you to tell us more about this and how that has helped you develop as a leader.
Uh, Thank you so much. Uh, I learned that leadership is first about being before it is about doing.
Mm.
A lot of the time, when people want to fix issues in their lives, they focus a lot on what to do. Yet, the nature comes before activity, comes before doing, right? We act consistent with our nature, with who we think we are. So we've got to start from there. One of my mentors, said something that shifted my mind many years ago. It was within the first year of our church in Nigeria. And I said to him, oh, we had this event. It was so powerful. We had a guest speaker. Then he said to me, he said, that was great. Congratulations. He said, I hope, though, that you don't think you'll be able to build that church on guest speakers.
Mm.
He said, because that church is not going to outgrow you. He said, why don't you become the person that people want to listen to? It's one of the most challenging statements I ever had in my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why don't you become, right?
Mm.
So we need to pay attention to our self-image. We never act beyond the capacity of that person that we see inside. That picture that we see, from it, we have our self-esteem, which is how we feel about ourselves. We have our self-respect, which is how we treat ourselves, and so on. So that self-identity is where the leader starts from. You've got to see yourself as a leader
Mm.
before you can be leading and influencing other people. So you've got to grow that person. I say that we humans are like magnets, living magnets. We have the capacity to attract, capacity to repel. So if the magnet is not attracting an object, you have two options. You can reduce the size of the object until the magnet can attract it, which is what many people do. They reduce the size of their dreams and aspirations and goals, or you can put more power in the magnet. And that's why we've got to listen to podcasts like
Yeah.
this,
Or read books like
read,
yours, or yeah.
thank you, read
Yeah.
books,
Yeah.
attend seminars and conferences, have a mentor, just feed.
Mm.
And information is that food that builds up the inner person of the leader.
Yeah. I believe that so strongly, Dr. Sam, and that identity drives so many other things. But the interesting thing, and you talk about this in your book, self-doubt, because you were, I think it was in your late 20s, you were already hosting a radio show. And so someone might think, well, this guy doesn't have any self-doubt. He, very confident. But the imposter syndrome is a real challenge for you, for me, and for most people listening to us. So what have you learned to do when you or someone you're working with is struggling with self-doubt?
Thank you. I think generally I've come to believe that we all are way better than we think we are, right? We're more powerful than we think we are. And I've come to realize it all starts from the mind, right? So power is first imagined. So my experience with going on radio, I I was obsessed with the idea. I believe it was a divinely inspired idea. Although I was asking myself, what authority do you have to teach people how to succeed? Because that was what I went to do on radio.
Yeah, yeah.
you know, I underestimated how much I knew, how much I had read on the topic in the bid to solve my own problem, right? But I'm grateful that in spite of the fact that I had self-doubt and I had fear, I went ahead
Mhm.
because I'm amazed at the things that showed up in the
Mhm.
process of taking action. First, I just mentioned it in church. I'm going to start a radio broadcast. Two gentlemen walked up to me after the service and said, "Oh, you mentioned about the broadcast." I said, "Yes." They said, "Can we see you for a few minutes? Can you tell us what your dream is?" When they introduced themselves, both of them worked in one of the leading advertising agencies, right? One of them was US trained. He had even worked with CNN and all of that. This was 29 years ago, right? So the people who could help me were there. But until I mentioned that vision, they did not show up. And of course, the money part scared me, right? But eventually, people supported, what I was doing. I even had more than enough for the first quarter. It's amazing that I, I, I took the fear along with me and did what I had to do anyway. And that's the encouragement that I would give to the person who's afraid, who's not sure how things will work out. Well, you will never find out until you try. And you had better know it. All of us feel the fear. Even successful people, after things begin to work out for you, many of us feel like, are you sure this is going to last? Are you sure you really deserve this? Are you really sure it's not just a freak accident somewhere and they're going to find out who you really are and things are going to go down the drain? Those questions plague our minds, right? But with time, we become comfortable with the fact that we're actually better than we think we are.
It's so good. I had a mentor who said it this way, Dr. Sam. He'd say, name the lie, insert the truth, is the way he said it. Name the lie, insert the truth. And I hope to never forget that, because I think a lot of times the self-doubt is sometimes a lie, and so how we talk to ourselves, that maybe goes back to your thinking on identity of, well, my boss
Yeah.
thinks I should be in this meeting, and even though maybe that other person might argue about this, I've done my homework, this project is good for us, like, name the lie, insert the truth. And I don't know, for some reason that helps me. But I think going back, the truth of who do you, even if you aren't there yet, who do you want to be? So your
Right?
identity is like I think in your case, this is who you were aspiring to be, right? That was part of it.
Absolutely. And you just remind yourself by looking at people whom you consider to be successful, and you remind yourself that they have only one head. They have only two hands. They actually are normal people like us.
Yeah.
Forget all those idealized pictures on social media and on TV. When you get to meet people, they are just exactly like us.
So much. Oh yeah, that is such a good point. You talk in your book, Dear Leader, about multiple generations in the workplace and how that impacts our ability to lead. Let's say someone listening to us is responsible for a team, and maybe there's some people on the team that are noticeably older than them, and then some people who are brand new to the workforce. So, what advice do you have for leading across generations?
Thank you. I consider communication, especially across the generations, like people on different planets trying to communicate with one another. The world view is different from generation to generation. The values are different from generation to generation. Um, so I sat next to this gentleman on a flight to New York some few years back, and he said he's an engineer, and we got talking. We're about the same age. So he said to me, "What's going on these days? I'm having issues working with younger people." So these guys can't, they come in at 9, quite all right, but they can't wait for it to be 5. And then they want to run away. You know, he said, we resumed work, yes, and then we left when the work was done, right? I said, well, I think it's a different viewpoint for these people. We didn't have a life. The job was our lives. I said, well, from what I see, I think they have a life outside work. I said, look at the tools at their disposals, all those phones, gadgets, and so on. They watch movies, they value entertainment and recreation a lot. So it does seem to me like they just use work to fund their lives. All right. So I'm just saying the viewpoints, the interpretations are completely different. And we're not going to communicate and influence one another positively except there's trust. And we're not going to build any trust until we know ourselves, we know one another. And, and we're not going to know one another except we communicate. If we're going to communicate, then we need to be listening across the generations. I think there's need for mutual respect. If we had the idea that being older makes us superior, I think we need to ditch those ideas, because I think these young people have their own points of advantage. They seem to have a hang of technology way better than we do, right? So we have a bit to learn from them, and they have a bit to learn from us. I worked on a site where the site supervisor was way older than myself. He had been working on sites for some 30 years, and I was fresh out of college. Wisdom told me to respect that gentleman, right?
Right.
And to ask a lot of questions, because I realized the knowledge I had was theoretical. He had a lot of experience,
Mm-hmm.
and I knew that I would still be better later on when I got to understand a lot of the practical things on the side. But for now, I needed to be humble. So I'll recommend that also. There's need for humility across the generations.
I appreciated the George Orwell quote that you included in that section, that every generation imagines itself to be more intelligent than the one before it and wiser than the one that comes after it. And that mindset can get us in trouble, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you, you're always thinking, okay, like, oh, your parents don't understand.
Right.
They don't know what's going on, until
Yeah.
you get older, and then you are amazed at how much they they know,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
So it's just all about humility. Nobody's
Yeah.
better. We're just different.
Yeah. Right. And if we can go into that with that mindset, yeah, that's good. You have a section in your book on personal branding. And I think that's something that people hear about, but sometimes they're concerned about, that they think building a brand is building their ego. And so how do you like to explain personal branding to aspiring leaders, and how is it different? Because I know in your book you differentiate it, right? So how is it different from building your ego?
Okay, so your brand is simply how people perceive you, what comes to their minds when they remember you or when they see you. And we tell leaders, you need to be intentional about that. Don't leave it to chance. Okay, for example, I keep wondering where I got the idea when I was young that when I was older, I got married, I had kids, my children needed to fear me.
Mhm.
I don't know where I got the idea from about leadership in the family,
Right.
but I used to imagine myself arriving from work and revving the engine of my car so that when the children had the sound in the house, all of them dived for cover and ran to their rooms. Now I'm grown, I'm wondering, where did I get the idea from?
Mm-hmm.
But if we don't take time to unpack our thinking, especially the subconscious one,
Mm-hmm.
the programming that went in, without us being conscious of it. If we don't unpack those things, we will be amazed at how people will perceive us, right? And then we'll be unhappy that people are gossiping about us, that they're saying things behind us, and we won't like the fact that people are spreading negative information about us. So my advice for leaders is you got to be intentional. What kind of a leader do you want to be,
Yeah.
right? And then you have that clear vision, and then define the values that will take you there, right? The behaviors that will take you there. I want to be known as a loving leader.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want the people on my team or the people I influence to even have any doubt at all as to the fact that I value them and I genuinely care about them. Like you said earlier on, I am devoted to them. When I have, for example, to discipline someone who's broken the rules, I want it to be that they know it's about the fact that they broke the rules. It's nothing personal, right? Good, because that makes it easier for people to accept punishment, should I say, right? It makes it easier, and it makes it easier for people to change their behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to be intentional about the kind of leaders we want to be and how we want people to perceive us, create a clear vision, and define clearly the values that will help you to achieve that personal branding vision.
I think of sometimes when people have concerns about this, Dr. Sam, it's almost like they think they're supposed to build up some facade of someone who they're not, and that would be more building up the ego. But this is just saying, if I understand you right,
Mhm.
how do I want to be perceived? Whether I am there or not, how do I want to, based on principles, values, and legacy and all kinds of other things, like how do I want to be perceived? And intentionally build that instead of prop up some fake Instagram worthy facade, right? Does that sound like the right difference?
Absolutely. I know when people hear the word branding, they think, oh, it's about people helping you to manage, your marketing, manage
Right.
your social media platforms, and then put in the right pictures and so on and all that. But at the end of the day, your values shine through everything.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Ultimately, the truth catches up
Mhm.
with whatever the pretensions are. So, how about actually behaving exactly the way that will help you to achieve that
Okay.
perception?
Yeah.
Whether we realize it or not, people are looking at us. And talking about the ego, I realize that the structures built around success generally in the society feed your ego.
Mhm.
The more successful you become, the bigger the titles you get, the bigger the office, the bigger the car, the bigger the house you live in, the bigger the salary you get. And if you're not careful, you get a bigger head.
Yeah.
You begin to think that you're actually superior to other people, that there's something that is special about you that is not
Mhm.
special about other people. And those are the places where leaders actually trip up because we still have our strengths, we still have our weaknesses. And with humility, it takes humility to admit that we have strengths and that we have weaknesses. And when we admit weaknesses, then we realize we need other people because their own areas of strength are places where we're weak. That's why we need a team. That's why we need synergy, right? And all that. So, um, yes, building your personal brand is not about building your ego and trying to prove to people that you are what you're not. Oh, no. It's about the fact that you have a clear vision about the kind of a leader you want to be and that you define the values, the behaviors that will take you there, and that you make a commitment to grow every day.
Yeah. That's so good. It's a good reminder because we have a brand, whether it's being intentionally worked on or not. What do they think about us, right? So they're thinking about that. So how do I want to be perceiving that? How can I move towards it? It's not about building something fake. Yeah. There's so many things I'd love to talk with you about, Dr. Sam, but we have a lot of parents. I'll end with this. We have a lot of parents who listen. Can you think of some ways that you and your wife tried to prepare? I think you have 3 children. Do I remember that? And that kind of
Yes.
grown now, but anything that you did to help prepare them to be the leaders they are now?
Thank you so much, Andy. Okay, so we agreed to have a family vision, right? Given that my wife and I had committed our lives to serve other people,
Mhm.
right? We had seen first that that is the essence of life, that your life is too small to be the purpose of your life, right?
Mhm.
It has to be about other people. All those phenomenal gifts and investments that God made into you are about other people. So both of us had decided that's the essence of success. That's the essence of life, of getting fulfillment. And that's the purpose of leadership. It's service. So with that, we developed a vision of service for our family, right? That our family will always produce people that serve others. And we instilled that in the children from the beginning. Uh, we decided to build a loving family, a loving and caring family the one thing our children know is that we would go to any length, right, to make sure they're okay, to make sure everyone is okay, right? We knew that the way my wife loves me, the way I love my wife, would communicate to them, right? The way we forgive ourselves, right? When we offend each other, that was communicating. We showed them value for knowledge.
Mhm.
We demonstrated value for knowledge. We started reading books to them when they couldn't even read yet.
Right, right. Yeah, I love that.
Right? And then they developed this love for books. We some of those books, written in series, we would buy and buy, especially at airports since we travel a lot. So they developed a love for reading. We made up our minds, would make sure they went to the best schools, you know, so, and gratefully, they're so well behaved, mild mannered. They are humble. I can confidently say that, and to us, these are family values. I remember the day our daughter came home with something that was not hers. And my wife would always check the bag, right? And then do some debriefing. It was like, who owns that? And you say, oh, it belongs to my friend. So what's it doing in your bag? So, well, I'm not sure. I loaned it from her, borrowed it from her, and then forgot to give her back. So, you know what? First thing tomorrow morning, give it to her. In our family, we don't take things that don't belong to us. Okay? Right? So there were those things where we defined in our family, so and so. Like someone was asking for a phone. And then we said, oh, sorry, in our family, you get a phone at so and so age. Okay.
Mhm. Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
So
yeah. I love those examples. It's really a nice alignment with, who are we as a family identity and what are the principles and values that you believe in, that you believe will help set them up for success then as well. And so you live that at home as much as you lived it at work. So yeah.
absolutely. There's a principle I discovered. You actually don't reproduce who you want, you reproduce who you are.
Mm, good.
So that put responsibility on us to actually live out the values that we wanted to see them cultivate.
Yeah. Yeah. It's reminded me of a conversation I had with just my wife this morning about one of our kids. So I will remember that line. Well, for those listening, if you've resonated with this discussion, get a copy of Dr. Sam's book, Dear Leader. Put links to the book and the book's website in the show notes for this cast. So, Dr. Sam, thank you so much for joining us on the People and Projects podcast.
Thank you so much. It's been exciting being with you on the podcast.